Part of today's articles, we'll be looking at the Indian Express. There are the number of articles that we have to do are slightly more. They're on the higher side. So, what am I going to do today? Today's articles are more about summarizing them so that it becomes easier for you to focus on what aspects you have to focus on, and this is more like a summary, unlike every other day, and primarily because a lot of these issues are standalone issues, more important from a very prelims specific point of view rather than mains. Okay, let's begin this article. Unlocking investment. See, the basic formula for GDP is X minus M. This is talking about investment. What is the significance of investment in an economy? Investment is supposed to give long-term stability to an economy. This stability comes from a sense of predictability that okay, this economy is going to be stable, so and so number of jobs are going to be created, this will be the kind of tax collection we'll have, a certain sense of predictability which gives stability to the overall society. And investment is supposed to give us that confidence. A very good sign of a healthy economy is how much investment is made into an economy and how much of it, after getting some profit out of the investment, is reinvested. If reinvestment is not happening in an economy, what does it indicate? It indicates that people are not confident about that economy. So, this article is primarily about how India should attract investment and how it should retain it. Here you need to understand two terms, FDI and FPI. This is long-term stable capital that is coming into the country where people are investing and trying to see a long-term possibility, see a long-term stability in an economy. Because once you establish, let's say for example, Walmart came into this country and invested in Flipkart. Why would someone invest in a company that is situated in India? It's because they have a sense of confidence that, okay, this company is going to do well. If that is not the case, it's more like, okay, there is an opportunity right now in India. Elsewhere, we don't see opportunities. So let's say we'll make some money and we'll exit. These are the two kinds of attitudes that an investor will have. I'm okay with, a stable, let's say for example, if I'm getting annually some 20% compounded annual growth rate, I'm okay with that. Or 25 to 30% in this year return. This is short-term thinking, that is long-term thinking. Investors usually are okay investing where they have a stable growth. If that is not the case, economic volatility will be very high when you depend on the second kind of investments, that is the foreign portfolio investments. Okay? If you take a look at India's situation, last year, net FDI means foreign direct investment, net FDI is equal to whatever may be the FDI that came into this country, gross FDI, minus repatriation. Meaning, how much money was, how much money that came as profits or dividends. Out of that, how much of that money was reinvested in the economy? Not a lot. People took profit out of it and left. For example, you see 81 billion is the total amount that came as FDI into this country. Out of that, only 0.35 billion is left as net FDI, meaning 96% of the money was taken out of the economy, which signals that they don't have confidence. When this kind of tendencies are exhibited in an economy, it just shows that the companies are not confident that we will do well in the medium term or in the future, near future. You also need to look at the factors. When you're talking about the factors, land, labor, capital, the basic funda, land, labor, capital, enterprise. See, always it's about the basic common sense. Day in and day out, you will have the same set of articles every day because it's about these 4 factors of production only: land, labor, capital, and enterprise. At each level, you will have problems. Land acquisition is a problem. Labor laws are not implemented. Capital mobilization becomes a problem. High interest rates, gross non-performing assets. All this will together contribute to the slowdown of an economy, and that's why unlocking investment becomes very important. We have to tap in the right kind of a capital, and usually we see that most of the investments are not happening in those areas which can transform the very structure of our economy. What do I mean by this? Let's say I give the same example in the basic classes also. I see some familiar faces from the basic classes. So let me give the same example. Let's say you have a floppy disk, which is a very prominent storage device way back in the 90s when the computer revolution just began. The storage of this is less than 2 MB. Today it is non-relevant. It's not at all relevant. It's obsolete because better storage devices, better methods of storing your data came into existence. So the structure of an economy shifted away from this redundant technology like a floppy disk and moved towards something more sophisticated like a cloud or better hardware storage devices like hard disks. Why did that happen? Because there was an investment into R&D and also the new software. Of course, software plus hardware that is associated with these technologies. That is when the structural transformation of an economy happens. Take the case of India in this case. Most of the investment that is coming in as an FDI is coming into those sectors where the possibility of structural transformation is virtually absent. Why is that? Because we are not investing in let's say semiconductors. The FDI is not coming into sectors like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, or any new frontier technology like 3D printing, smart manufacturing, which can transform the entire economic picture of this country. What do we need to do? This is the focus of the article. Basic funda. Transform the land, labor and capital sectors. They are called the factor market reforms. Factor market reforms are a prerequisite for a structural transformation of an economy. This is a key idea that I want you to take away. Okay, that's it for this article. Second one, the flaw in the exam. The problem here that this article is talking about is previously there is a definitive purpose of class 10 and class 12 board examinations. If students do well in this, there is a certain element of predictability or an outcome that was associated with good percentages in these exams. Now with the prominence of new selection methods like the common university entrance exam, CUET, NEET, multiple such competitive exams, what is the role of these exams is becoming more and more obscure or very unclear, both to the parents as well as the teachers as well as the students. All the stakeholders are not clear about the role of this board exams. It is an unnecessary pressure when they have no outcome. Because let's say a lot of colleges in Delhi University, they take into consideration your 11th and 12th scores. 12th scores basically. What is the point when they are not taken into consideration when you have exams like COET? There should be some clarity on the role of these exams. Otherwise, you will have multiple exams where the very nature of education, which is supposed to impart some scientific temper, which is supposed to impart some scientific temper, which is supposed to teach some values, becomes a place where coaching overtakes education. It shouldn't become a blind race to get into the colleges at the cost of these two important takeaways from education: scientific temper and value-based education. And that is the central takeaway from this article. Soil of a nation. Today's article, the most important one, please spend some time on this. The prerequisites for understanding this article comes from GS1, Geography, Indian Geography. You have to go back to your NCERT textbooks to understand Indian Geography, soils. Okay? What are the various kinds of soils that are there in our country? What is their spatial spread? Understand this and then come back to this article. Okay? Now, with the presumption that you know some basics about geography and soils, I am taking this article. In case you don't know the problems of Indian soil or what Indian soils are, I will give you a brief background. In India, because of the geographical variability, there are lots of soils, different kinds of soils: alluvial soil, black soil, red soil, laterite soils, etc., so on and so forth. For each of those soils, the geographical conditions, meaning the underlying rock layers, the climatic conditions like rainfall, sunlight, then weathering, amount of stress on that soil, all of this together give rise to the structure of the soil in its original form. Agriculture is because of how we are able to manipulate the available soils. Traditionally, if you go to any area, in one or the other element is missing from Indian soils. Fertilizers are a way of replenishing that missing element from the soil so that we have better yields. The very problem of Indian soils and Indian agriculture is that the methodology is not scientific enough. What do I mean by this? If you take a look at a human body, just like how you give a blood sample and realize that these are the things that are good in our body, these are the things which are deficient. Similarly, we are supposed to have a report card. Just like how we have a blood report for human beings to understand the health, we need to have a report card for soils as well. The government came up with one such scheme called the soil health card. Okay. When you test it in a laboratory, it will give you what are the areas of focus that we need to, and this changes from one geography to another. What are the elements that we need to focus on? We have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur, boron, so on and so forth, zinc. Traditionally, when we're talking about fertilizer subsidy, this you have to link it. GS3, budgeting. In budget, you have to understand the concept of subsidies. Where will these subsidies come under? Where? In how much of that goes for fertilizers? See, what are the top subsidies? Food, fertilizer and fuel. Exactly. Food and fuel together comprise which part of economics? Inflation. If you remove them, another metric will come into the picture. What is that metric? Core inflation. Perfect. See, when you are thinking, you have to map these articles like this, both from an economic standpoint as a metric, qualitative as well as quantitative. This is quantitative picturing of the article that we are looking at. The qualitative aspect will be about where we are spending. The why and the what should be very clear, and it should be present in front of your eyes, like a snapshot. Clear? So, when you look at this article, the takeaway is that we are not spending enough in the other nutrient categories, both as a subsidy or even if the farmer wants to proactively take up. We don't have enough fertilizers to cater to sulfur, boron, zinc and other kind of micronutrients. And this is definitely impacting the yields. If we want better yields, let's go back to basics. We don't need to have bioengineered seeds all the time. Sometimes getting the basics right is all that we need. We have to trust the nature-based solutions and go back to the basics. In a bit to make this happen, we have to go towards biofertilizers. Why biofertilizers? One, because it encourages a cyclical economy, circular economy, where biodegradable waste can be repurposed as biofertilizers, which will add nutrition to the soils. And there is no coherent policy on this front. Entire emphasis was on fertilizer subsidy, whether it is the urea, diammonium phosphate or any other potassium based or phosphorus based fertilizers only, predominantly urea. And these fertilizers are chemically produced from natural gas. As a result, we are not only losing strategic autonomy by depending on an external agent, we are also harming our environment. That needs to change. The entire emphasis of this article is to give you a very micro level, granular level suggestions on how to fix this. And this is the takeaway from this article. Any article written by Mr. Ashok Gulati from Indian Express basically talks about a middle path between state-led intervention and private sector's participation. It focuses more on how we can improve the productivity. So any article that you can come across, Mr. Ashok Gulati, who is a professor in agricultural economics, you will see a lot of practical insight, whether it is the usage of technology, whether it is pricing reforms, whether it is structural reforms in the very nature of how agriculture is conducted. And therefore, please pay attention to any article that is coming from Indian Express written by Mr. Ashok Gulati. Time and again, you will see the common thought process underlying his arguments. State should just govern, not completely control agriculture. There should be some element of trust on the private sector, and the role of state is to facilitate that kind of a participation where there is an investment into agriculture to make it more productive and more science-based. This is the common thread in all his arguments. How can we go for better utilization of the available funds? how can we bring efficiency? These are the major arguments in his articles. Consistently across many articles, you will see the same line of thought, which is good. If you have to restructure your entire understanding of agriculture, let's do it this way. You put it as input, processing, and an output. At each level, whether it is seeds, fertilizer, capital, labor costs, everything included, machinery, Mr. Gulati has some kind of a vision on each of these inputs, each of the process, each of the output, and how it needs to be marketed across the country and across the world. So this comes in tandem with the agri export policy. And this process is about how we can make agriculture more efficient. What kind of technologies should come in? Once you understand agriculture as a system where you categorize the entire agriculture as inputs, process and output, each of his articles, no matter how scattered they are, that structure will help you figure out where we can place different articles. Okay? Let's move to the next one. Inequalities, many champions. See, this article is a critical exposition on women issues. The underlying point that the writer is trying to make is the element of hypocrisy, which is universal across parties lines, and how the political talk is not translating into action. For example, the article writer says that, let's say for example, there is a poll level violence in Bengal where TMC workers are not really empowering women. If you take the look at the ruling party BJP in some other states, the situation is more or less the same. We have this Pati Panchayat kind of a phenomenon where women are just treated like rubber stamps, where they do not get to take their own decisions. And that needs to change. And this requires significant shift in social attitudes, which requires a cross-party consensus, at least in the terms of political empowerment. With the latest amendment, where 33% of the seats are reserved for women in the legislative houses at the center, it's an opportunity to bring about that change. Every change takes a lot of churning in a society, so a political measure should be seen as a tool to make it better. Okay, that's the takeaway from this article. Yeah. %78% coal plants won't need to add anti-pollution devices. The problem that we are dealing with. Coal plants. Coal plants are very polluting. We all know that. So, depending on their age, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change categorize them into A, B and C. Each of this have a common problem. Coal is inherently very polluting. So the power plants are supposed to have some sense of responsibility towards not polluting it. So if we divide the power plants that are existing in our country, the C category is more or less very technologically advanced. So there are certain norms for reducing sulfur emissions. Flue gas desulfurization, FGD technology. FGD units were mandated for some power plants. A, B and C categories. But they incur a cost, nearly 15 to 20 crores, 10 to 20 crores, whatever may be the amount. They incur an additional cost. Recently, a couple of years ago, government decided that we will let the C category go away, not make it mandatory, because it's not expensive. Now the government decided we will let go of even B category because they are supposed to be decommissioned in another 5 to 10 years, which doesn't justify the cost for these power plants, which makes it very economically unviable. And as a result, this B category is also exempted, which leads to 78% of the coal plants out of the ambit of this FGD implementation. Clear? That is the thing that you need to know. Relief from food inflation. It's again a pretty straightforward article. If you read it, you will understand it. When you talk about inflation, there are two sides, supply and demand. If inflation is coming under control, either demand should reduce or supply side, there are no problems. Do you think food demand will come down so drastically? No. It just means that supply side things are good. We have proper rainfall, we have proper yield, everything is fine. That's the reason food inflation came into control. Same thing will be corroborated with facts, and it is not important for you to remember quarterly data. Just observe that supply and demand, whenever they are in unity, things will be fine. When they are not, things will not be fine. That's all you need to know. Finally, when it comes to this M.F. Hussain's art, time and again I tell people that art and culture is mostly about the values expounded as a part of the symbolism. If you take a look at this article about M.F. Hussain's paintings, it talks about the values that are expounded, mainly the horse, which is usually represented. How did the representation of this horse change, and what is its takeaway? Horse is taken as a symbolic element which signifies freedom. Whenever you are looking at an artist's work, always observe the time period in which he operated. We are basically talking about a time period in post-independence era. So he was someone who went through the trauma of partition, the religious conflicts, the bloodbath and the tensions of partition era. So you would notice those kind of elements through his art. Not only that, after that phase is over, as every person evolves in their age, their thought process also gets evolved. From 1960s, you will notice that there is a lot of global influence on the artist. Western artists like Picasso, as the artist reads more and more about them, where abstraction, meaning abstract modern art, that element of modern art creeped into M.F. Hussain's paintings over a period of time, which exemplifies the values that he wanted to carry forward. New thought process came into the existence, but the original seed of horse and what it represented as a culmination of Islamic as well as modern elements, Islamic modern as well as Hindu elements, that was signified through his art. Are you supposed to by heart all this? Maybe, maybe not. You can add them as a part of your modern paintings notes, but what I want you to focus on and what I want you to do when you're reading art and culture elsewhere is to focus on what themes are asked, what themes are you know represented in those paintings. It can be devotional themes like Ramayana or Mahabharata. But why are we doing it? What does it signify to that set of population? To that population, why they must be doing this? There should be some logic. Correct. What is that logic? Your ability to capture those nuances and compare them with the modern times is what gives you an edge in this exam. Draw some parallels. There are some similarities across time periods as to how artists think. They are also human beings. They also evolve over a period of time. They also simplify some things, make some things abstract. In what direction they are moving, why are they moving? You have to capture that. And that is the essence of studying art and culture. To learn from them. UPSC is not expecting you to memorize them as a bunch of facts. It's a story that needs to unfold and give you a picture of the people in those time period. And that is the takeaway from this article. With this, we are concluding today's session. That's it for the day. Thank you.